Have you ever seen the zombie version of Minthara or Dror Ragzlin in Act 2? What about the Golden Minotaur? And did you know that bartender Honk has a secret brother who only appears in a very specific scenario? If not, then you're in the right place. During a playthrough of Baldur's Gate 3, there are literally thousands of choices to make, which can lead to so many different possibilities that many of the outcomes are never seen by the players. So in this video, we'll take a look at what I feel are 10 of the hardest to find encounters or NPCs in Baldur's Gate 3. Starting things off with the Stormshore Tabernacles, Djinns, and Cambions. During Act 3, in the basement of the Stormshore Tabernacle, there are several chests which when robbed will inflict the player with a curse to spawn an enemy deva when cured. If you found this part, it's not too surprising. But did you know that if you're a cleric, then it could spawn Djinns or Cambions instead of a deva? Depending on the cleric's choice of deity, the creature type will change. For example, if you pick the Tempest deity, then it will spawn 1 or 2 Djinn for you to face off against. And if you have any of the evil deities, such as Vlaakith or Shar, then it'll spawn Cambions instead. Because most players take Shadowheart as their cleric and you cannot manually change her deities, it would be pretty rare for somebody to naturally encounter these Djinn in a playthrough. Did you know that it's possible to encounter the leader of the Zhentarim in Act 3? While it's not strange that a high-ranking character like this is in the game, it is a bit strange that she only appears as a failsafe character for someone else. Boss Friol will only show up if the traitor Roa Moonglow has died in either Act 1's Goblin Camp or in Act 2's Moonrise Towers. In Act 3, she will act as a replacement during the encounter with Minsk in the sewers, where she attempts to run away with the stolen money from the bank. If you do let her escape, then you can meet her again in the Thieves Guild hideout once more for another battle. Here she'll actually offer you an alliance with the Zhentarim if you help them take over the Thieves Guild. Normally, Roa Moonglow would have been here instead to offer the same deal, and if you did decide to help them, they promise to aid you in the final battle against the Absolute. However, there's one slight problem here, as Boss Friol will not actually provide you with any help at all in the final battle. The quest log even says she will, but there's no options when you get to that point. Alternatively, if you had helped the original quest giver with this instead, she will provide you with the Call Forth Allies button in the final section of the game, which allows you to summon some extremely weak Zhentarim allies, which for some reason in my playthrough had just 1 health. Boss Friol is also not a vendor like Roa is, meaning this Zhent leader character is just worse in every way. If you decide to kill her, she does drop the 10,000 gold that was stolen from the bank and a +1 longbow. In Moonrise Towers, there are actually 2 encounters which are very easily missed by players, and since they're in the same location, I figured I'd group them together. The first encounter is with these hungry gargoyles. To find them, you first need to head out the back of Balthazar's bedroom and onto the balcony. There you can find a platform which you can jump up to. After climbing some vines and jumping across a few more platforms, you'll find 3 starving ghouls. These ghouls will explain to you that the Absolute promised them flesh, but hasn't actually given them any food. From there you can choose to fight them, or you can use Illithid Wisdom to convince 2 of them to turn on the other one. These gargoyles all have no loot, but it is a fun little conversation which even players with hundreds of hours may have never spotted. A second encounter in Moonrise Towers, which is easily missed, is located inside the prison area, which I'm sure most players did explore once in a playthrough because it has a few important story characters in there to chat with. However, if you come back here after freeing the Night Song during the assault on Moonrise Towers, then you can actually be greeted by several new enemies, which are not normally down here at any other time. These enemies include a Death Shepherd, several Necromites, and Cerebel, who looks nearly identical to another character from upstairs. Maybe they're twins. There's not really anything notable to be obtained here besides a few below average flails and an inspiration for Lae'zel, but it's easily missed because it's one of the very few areas in the game where returning to it later will have a new encounter for you. Zombie Minthara and Zombie Dror Ragzlin. Nearly everyone who's played Baldur's Gate 3 has encountered Dror Ragzlin and Minthara in Act 1, but did you know that in Act 2 it's possible to encounter them again, but as zombies? It is a bit of a long process, but first you need to kill both of them in Act 1, then progress through nearly all of Act 2 and let Balthazar take the Night Song. You must have also either killed Isabel or kidnapped her at Light's Inn. Then when you return to Ketheric, he's friendly with you and will ask you to pray to the Absolute. But when you try to pray, instead you are kidnapped by him and taken into the Mind Flayer colony. Once inside, Balthazar here will begin his task to extract the prism from the player. And if you look closely, he has 2 zombie guards at his side. One is Minthara and the other Dror Ragzlin. In case you wondered, if these characters were alive during Act 1, when you get to this encounter, they would instead just be regular zombies. This exact scenario is pretty difficult to find because you have to have sided with the good guys in Act 1 by killing the goblin leaders and then change sides and help the evil characters in Act 2, which is a pretty uncommon way to go through the game. And I'm sure a lot of people didn't even know it's possible to fight Balthazar in the Mind Flayer colony at all, because he can be fought in 2 other areas prior to this. The Shadows of Thay. In Act 1, you can locate a book called the Necromancy of Thay, a book which, if kept, provides some amazing bonuses to your party throughout the game. When you first pick up the Necromancy of Thay, it is hinted that the book has the option to be destroyed, and if examined, you'll see that it is weak to radiant damage. Should the player choose to cast a radiant spell on the book, it will be destroyed, granting the party some experience and summoning 3 shadow enemies that will attack the player immediately. These are the only shadow creatures that you'll find in Act 1, and they don't really put up much of a challenge. Normally, you lose the ability to destroy this book after you've read it, because it becomes becomes impossible to remove from your inventory. Making this choice removes your opportunity to get power from the book during Act 3 and grants you basically nothing in return. So it's probably the one encounter on this list that I'd never recommend anybody to actually do. Bugthimble and the Kobolds. During Act 3, should the player choose to dig up a specific dirt mound in the lower city graveyard, then the kobold Bugthimble will appear. The player can attempt to use deception to fool the kobold, but if it fails, he will summon 6 holes in the ground, which will each spawn a kobold ally on their turn. It's a pretty unique fight because you're able to block the enemies from being spawned if you either stand on top of the dirt mounds or place objects on top of them. It's a mechanic that I kind of wish they would have used elsewhere, because it was quite interesting to have a different way to go about the fight. If you did instead pass that deception check, then you'll actually tell the kobold that the grave you dug up was your father's grave, and you'll earn no experience or item rewards at all. It just skips the fight. I'm pretty sure this encounter is the only one in the game that starts from digging, and it's in an area where you could easily miss it because there are so many other locations that digging does not really do anything. Defeating this kobold does drop a unique weapon named Kerwin's Cauterizer, which is quite weak for this point in the game, but because of how unique of a fight it is, I did want to include it on this list. BOOOAL. While I'm sure many people have seen this encounter by now, I did want to include it because I think it is the hardest to find encounter in Act 1. In the Underdark, you can jump along these mushrooms at X70, Y-239, just southeast of the Underdark beach, to find an entrance to a hidden cove. Going inside takes you to the Festering Cove, with several Kuatoas praying to BOOOAL. If spoken to, they demand blood, and this leaves you with several options. You can attempt to persuade them by offering to kill in his name, you can choose to battle him, or you can choose to sacrifice one of your companions to gain a buff, which grants you advantage whenever you attack a bleeding target. This is one of the only situations in the game that allow you to permanently dispose of one of your allies, and because of the way the mushrooms blend into the background, it's an area that most people probably didn't see. The Golden Minotaur. The Devil's Fee is a store located in Act 3, and inside you can interact with its owner, a diabolist named Helsik. Most players would not choose to attack her because she is a friendly vendor and quest giver. However, if you did decide to do battle with her, she will then call to her side several unique imps and minotaur of the golden variety. Each of these golden minions do additional 6d6 damage when attacking someone Helsik has marked with greed. While they are just a reskin of something else, it continues to blow my mind just how many creatures Larian put into this game that you only ever see once. Enemies like this are just a constant reminder that other game developers need to step it up in the future. Number 2 on the list, I wanted to share a few characters which will only appear depending on your choice of origin character. These are all encounters which will never be seen by people who just play as the standard Tav character. Should the player start the game as Lae'zel, then on the Nautiloid ship you will get a new Githyanki fighter companion, Losir, who will accompany you and act as her replacement through the prologue. He has a second set of Githyanki armor which can be pretty useful early on, and after the prologue, his corpse can be found on the beach. Should you start the game as Gale, then during your first long rest you'll encounter his Tressum friend, Terra, who will stay at your camp and even gift you a unique ring, the Ring of Evasion. This cat-like creature recommends the player to consume the ring to aid Gale's need to consume magical items. This character normally doesn't appear until Act 3 unless the main character is Gale. If you play as the Dark Urge, and the bard tiefling Alfira has died in your playthrough, then a dragonborn bard named Quill Grootslang will appear in your camp one night. She is the only dragonborn NPC in Act 1, and is only encounterable as a failsafe for Alfira, meaning most players who do play as the Dark Urge would still not even see her. She has a few unique dialogue lines explaining how happy she is to be alive, but ultimately, no matter what you do, she will not survive the night at your camp. Dark Urge has several other unique encounters, but this is the only one that you're likely to miss, as killing Alfira serves no real purpose. In case you wondered, as far as I could tell, Astarion, Shadowheart, Will, and Karlach did not bring any new characters when played. I did play each of these characters all the way into Act 3, and there is a few unique cutscenes, but there's not really any new characters introduced early on like these other ones have. And lastly, I saved what I feel is the absolute rarest character in all of Baldur's Gate 3 for last, and that is the bartender's brother, Honk. Honk is a character which has no wiki page. There are also no videos about Honk, and when searching Google for information about Honk, there was only one Reddit post asking if he even exists, as there is a letter in the game which references him, but the post received no answers. So, who is Honk? Well, Honk is Hank's brother, and you might be wondering who the hell Hank is. Hank is the owner of the Singing Lute Tavern in Act 3, and during Karlach's dating scene, Honk will appear as a failsafe for Hank when Hank has been killed before you go on a date with Karlach.
Hey, Hank? I think we ordered the...
Bleeder.
There's literally nothing that changes about the cutscene other than the voice itself, and in the cutscene, Karlach calls him Honk instead of Hank.
Hey, Honk. I think we ordered the...
Bleeder.
It's probably the laziest failsafe in the entire game, but I was amazed that Larian created him for this one short scene that basically no one will ever see. Because in order to see this character, you have to have romanced Karlach and killed Hank before the dating scene, a character which has no real reason to die at all. Quick shout out to the commenter Izillion Nell. for letting me know about Honk, because I'm sure almost nobody would have found him if not for you. Now I have to ask, do you know of any rare or easily missed encounters in Baldur's Gate 3? And did you know all the NPCs on this list? If so, let me know in the comments below. As always, thanks for watching and have yourself a wonderful day. Proxy out.
Not everyone subscribes.